Sorry, it just stuck with me. It's probably not the answer you wanted, but that's what you got. Okay, my name's Wendy, Casson. I'm head teacher of Educational Diversity in Blackpool. We are a large pupil referral unit and also our home hospital education service for Blackpool. We're run on several different sites, catering for young people between the age of 6 and 16 who are unable to access mainstream due to a variety of reasons. Well, you've got to make sure you follow statutory and non-statutory guidance, really. You've got to continue to work in a child-centred approach that maintains the dignity, respect and the protection of the young person you're working with. Quite often schools say, oh, I've got this young person that it's been alleged that they've done this or they've done that. They'd have to come to you, and I say, well, why? Because all you need to do is manage that risk within your setting, because you know that young person better than us, and you've got to understand that there might be an allegation against them, but somewhere down the line that young person's probably been a victim themselves. So you've just got to maintain the dignity of them, rather than react to what's in front of you. Try and sort of find out what some of the causal factors are so that you can make an informed approach. Every young person that's a victim of peer-to-peer abuse or they're a perpetrator, you've got to maintain the young person underneath there, so you can't forget them. But you've got to make sure that you put risk assessments around them, so you make sure that they're protected all the time and others around them are protected all the time. I think the use of an adult in the classroom as a one-to-one is helpful, so you know, they make sure there's always supervised. It's difficult when there's both peers who've been abused, the victim and the perpetrator in the same setting, but you've got to carefully manage that. You can look at timetable changes, make sure we've got different settings, so perhaps one can go in one setting, one can go in the other, but we have had both in the same setting. It's about managing that risk carefully, because it's about you don't react, you plan for it. We had 3 or 4 young men who were there was ongoing court cases, or there'd been a fresh allegation about one young individual, and some was with siblings and some was with others. And one young person had just come over to us, and every year we go to an outdoor residential, so we either go to water parks, or this year we went to Borwick Hall. And Anna said, Wendy, she said, can we take this young man? I went, of course we can, but we'll have to do a sitting watch. That's like a sleeping watch. So that's fine. We offer all our young people to go on these trips. We don't exclude anybody. And this young person was the first person to come back with a complete application form. And I think his dad or his mum said, well, you'll never be able to go, but here you are. I went, yeah, we'll do it. And we put a risk assessment around it. And we managed it really carefully. We planned for it. We made sure that those 4 young people had a certain block where they were sleeping. There was 2 members of staff. We were around the corner, stopped up all night with them outside the room to make sure they were safe. And I remember sending pictures of that young person, you know, on the top of the leap of faith, in a canoe, and the social worker and the parents couldn't believe it. So with peer-to-peer sexual abuse in schools, you've got to use a whole-centred approach, but you've got to keep the dignity of the perpetrator and the victim at the centre of everything you do. If concerns happen, then you've got to really make sure that the child-centred approach is there, but also don't react to situations. Make sure you really understand the needs and make sure you risk assess and everything else, so that you're preventing anything happening. We leave behaviour behind, and all our policies are around positive reinforcement. We focus on our 4 C's of confidence, commitment, challenge and control. So we have to demonstrate confidence in our learning, confidence in our teaching. So it's no longer focused on behaviour. We move away from that, and what we do, we try and find out, I always call it presenting behaviours or primary need. So we look at really what's underneath those presenting behaviours, and we remove those barriers, and then guess what? The behaviours begin to dissipate because we get to know the child. I am fed up of people saying that the PRU is, or having this assumption that the PRU is just a nice environment that we babysit. When I first took over, I think there was an element of babysitting. I think the appropriate challenge to young people wasn't there. So they did very few qualifications, and now we make sure that all our young people can get any qualification they're capable of achieving, from entry level up to GCSE, up to BTECs, diplomas, whatever we think they can achieve. We try and give them access to it. The difficulty for us, local colleagues and quite influential people realising the good work that goes on here. You can walk around and there's an assumption that some young people are on part-time timetables all the time. We use part-time timetables when it's absolutely necessary to meet the rest of that young person, but they're on progression plans, so very quickly they access full time. So when you've got a child who's terminally ill, do you know what? Sometimes they are going to be on an hour a day, so it's about understanding the reasons behind it. Some schools think you can bring an all singing, all dancing behaviour guru in and everything will be fixed. All that happens is they're great and I think they're inspirational, but what happens is you ride a wave. So if somebody comes in and everybody goes, oh, that's fantastic. So for the first week, the first half term, everybody's on the wave, but the tide always goes out. So when the tide goes out, the strategies stop. You've got to sustain it. So it's about supporting schools to make change, a whole philosophy change, not a strategy change on the individual young person, really. A few years ago, we understood better the link between social, communication and language difficulties and needs with behaviour. So we offered a short-term intervention programme called Chrysalis, and it was based on a foundation of getting the young person to understand about the behaviours and the needs. We did lots of diagnostics, so we identified that 100% of our learners at Key Stage 3 have had an undiagnosed, or even more worryingly, an unmet SLCN need. So Key Stage 3 went to 97%. Key Stage 4 dropped to 86%, not because it disappeared, but because they developed other coping mechanisms. So we suddenly, there's something there to work in. I mean, we're the first Peer in the country to get communication friendly status across all settings, but it's about really understanding some of those primary needs of the young people. So we've supported schools to set up their own chrysalis type models of short-term intervention. We do lots of outreach supporting schools. We do the 5-point scale, we do some principles of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, we do some de-escalation techniques. My colleague Anna is an advanced trainer of MAPA, which is managing actual and potential aggression. So that's not about putting hands on, that's the last resort. It's about using de-escalation techniques and strategies to bring the behaviour of that young person down. Well, first of all, don't pretend to be inclusive, be inclusive. Look beyond what the presenting behaviours are to want to get to know what the primary needs behind it are. So it's a bit like we talked about peer-to-peer abuse. Don't be reactive. All your strategies have got to be informed. You've got to adopt each strategy for the young person you're working with, but it's got to be whole school led by a leader who thinks, has a philosophy. And any staff who aren't inclusive, then well, I wouldn't want them working with us. So you've got to be strong and make sure that you get the right staff with the right philosophy with young people.